right, welcome everyone, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to this information session about talent assessments in the workplace. My name is Tatyana St. Germain. I'm the founder and CEO of Great People Management. And over the past almost 20 years, I've been helping organizations worldwide and nationwide select, develop, and keep great people. But my superpower is not what I do or what I know, it's assessments. And so, because I've used assessments for so many years, I've encountered many myths and problems and many questions associated with it. So I thought I'd put together this information session, and I actually present this information to associations and consulting firms, and it just helps to have all this information in one place. So my intention for today is to provide you with information. I'm not here to sell you anything or sell you on a particular assessment tool. I am really here as your resource, provide you information, answer questions, share my experiences. And what I hope that you will do is you listen and participate, ask questions, engage in the chat. My trusted, wonderful executive assistant, Smila, is standing by and monitoring the chat and Q&A section. So whichever one you're most comfortable with, feel free to chime in. Engage with us, ask questions, and then after the session, go out there and apply your knowledge. If you choose that assessments is the right thing for your organization, make every human decision greater with the data provided by the assessments, because this is what best-in-class companies do. So to start off, I wanted to reiterate many of the things that you guys already know, which is people is the number one concern for every organization these days. I've been saying for many years that people are the foundation of every business, and you frankly cannot run an organization. You can't run a company without people. But funny enough, maybe not so funny, but it's only in the last 3 years when people realize that 50 to 60% of their workforce walks out, they realize, oh my goodness, I literally cannot run a company without people. And so it became a number one concern. I'm located in Wisconsin, so this is from the Manufacturing Association. Finding and keeping employees is their number one concern. I'm sharing this because I am surprised myself. I have never seen these kind of statistics in almost 20 years that I've been doing this. What contributes to company success? Again, it's people, finding qualified employees, keeping them, developing leaders and managers. Another interesting statistic is that about 55%, a little over 55% of workers left their jobs because of people-related issues. And as bad bosses, some of the things that you already know, like people don't quit companies, they quit bad bosses. So that is still rings true. Another interesting one is bad colleagues. That came out as a number one, as one of the more important issues and some of the reasons why people leave. Also not feeling appreciated, and many other reasons, all related to people. And Gartner research tells us that this quit culture is here to stay. So we cannot just sit and wait it out. Organizations have to take steps because that's it. The resignation is here to stay. Imagine you had to live in the world where 50 to 60% of your workforce maybe not leave, but plans to leave, and they're constantly looking. And people are definitely acting on it. So why are employers not doing more to address these issues that they know about? Some of them think that it's too expensive. Some of them think that they've already raised their benefit, they improved their benefits, and implemented many other retention strategies, which it's a separate session. I've accumulated a whole list of different retention strategies and how they work and don't work. So they think that maybe they can't afford the solution. They don't know if there is a solution to these kind of softer, touchy-feely, very human issues. They don't know which solution is right for them. And frankly, people are just too complicated and unpredictable. But what we do know based on research is that what people care about and the reasons they stay is when we focus on interactions. By we, I mean organizations, not transactions. When it's just transactions and you have bonuses, salaries, and benefits, packages, etc., doesn't seem to work to impact retention and turnover. What people want is to be valued by managers. They want potential for advancement. They want to work on a complementary team with great team members, and many other related issues. And we really cannot address that. We cannot create a consistent language throughout the organization to improve these interactions without assessments. Very few people in the world are capable of doing that, kind of seeing through people. And that's where assessments can help us. I've been saying that I've helped companies fix people problems. And really, we can't fix what we don't understand. Why don't we understand people? Because people are the most unpredictable aspect of your business. They are complicated and complex. And through day-to-day interactions and interviews, you only get to see about 10% of who they really are. And that's the tip of the iceberg. The 90% of who they really are comes later. It shows up later. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. For some leaders, it was a bad thing if they were miscast for the job. Like, think back to March, April of 2020. There were so many presidents of companies that failed publicly and spectacularly. I've observed personally some of these failures. But then there's so many frontline employees who kind of stepped up to the plate and saved their organizations or saved their teams, improved productivity, and so on. So people tell me, oh, that came out of left field. It didn't come out of left field. It's always been there. And if you had assessments, you would have known. You would have known what was the 90% of the total person that lies dormant beneath the water surface, and it typically stays there until something happens, until we're stressed, tired, sick. And assessments also help us build people so that people can build companies. Remember, we don't build companies, we build people. Wouldn't it be wonderful if people walked around with strengths and weaknesses written all over them? Or like in the Jumanji game, you knock on somebody's forehead and a call out pops up with all their strengths and limitations. Unfortunately, it's not the case, but with assessments, when you implement a proper assessment, you can come pretty close, because what you're doing is you're kind of condensing or deciphering the billions of possible outcomes when you're working with billions of people. You don't know how this person is going to react in this situation or in this situation. Will they perform well in this position or not perform well? So you're condensing all of that billions of possibilities in potentially just a couple of buckets. So this brings us to the topic of different assessment types. And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. There's more information available on the topic, and we're happy to continue to be your resource and talk to you about different assessment types. So the first very popular assessment type is personality tests. Those fall in the category of ipsative assessments. They help us put people in buckets. Why is it helpful? Well, again, because you out of billions of possibilities and possible outcomes, you're putting people in 4 buckets, or assign them 4 letters or 5 letters or colors. Those are all personality tests. These are all of your DISC and DISC derivatives, Big 5, Strength Finders, Predictive Index, Culture Index, Myers-Briggs, and many, many thousands of others. There are over 4,000 just DISC-based assessment tools. There's pluses and minuses associated with personality tests. Pluses are, obviously, the pros are that they're inexpensive typically. They don't take long to take. They provide very good information, categorizing people. However, the limitation is they're not valid and useful in pre-employment. And many good personality assessments will include that statement in their technical manual. And so it's important to read the technical manual to talk about the application of the assessment, proper application. In fact, Myers-Briggs will remove your right to purchase if they find out that you're using their assessment for pre-employment. They value their reputation, and this assessment is much better when it's applied in post-employment. So why can't you use personality assessments for pre-employment? That's another big question that people ask me. Well, it's very simple, actually, because the questions on the assessment are self-descriptive, self-reported, and very transparent. So if you really want the job, let's say it's a sales job, and the question has something to do with being social, are you going to say, yeah, I love people, or are you going to say, I hate people? If you really want the job, you're going to provide a socially desirable answer. And that's what skews the reliability, test-retest reliability of the assessment and makes it invalid for pre-employment. Another reason practical reason. I think it's pretty obvious. Just because somebody fits in a blue bucket doesn't make them a great salesperson. Even if you've consistently seen that your most successful people typically fall in the blue bucket. People are much more complex than that, and you need a little more sophistication. So the next assessment type is normative assessment. They typically are longer, more expensive, but they provide more in-depth information about the individual. Remember the 90% of the total person that's under the water surface? That's their occupational DNA, their occupational fingerprint. And only normative assessments help us kind of take a peek at that. They typically include cognitive, behavioral, and motivational information, sometimes more. It's like a battery of different assessments in one. And the biggest difference in the line of questioning, when questions are presented and the person answers the question, those answers are going to be normed against working population. That's why it's a normed assessment. That's why it's a bell curve. There's no good or bad answer. You just see how the person is relative to other people, and then you can make predictions as to what type of characteristics actually contribute to success in this position or in another position. And we can talk more about those assessment types. Feel free to chime in with questions. Think about all the different assessment tools that you may be using now or have used in the past in your prior careers. There's skills tests, there's aptitude tests. So the two assessment types that I mentioned, ipsative and normative, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's also emotional intelligence assessment. There's neuroagility assessment and training that comes with it that become very popular with leadership. Career testing. I have high schoolers myself, so I always talk about the importance of career orientation and career testing. And of course, the 360s. And again, this is probably not even a complete list of different assessment tools you might have used. I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about what Department of Labor has to say about using assessments in the workplace. The question I get quite often is, Tatyana, are assessments even legal to use? Well, the answer is a little more complex than that, than yes and no, because you really have to address the purpose that you're using assessments for. And that's one of the key takeaways from this assessment and testing guide from Department of Labor. And the assessment guide itself is like 90 pages or something, so it's pretty lengthy. It's very comprehensive. We've created an executive summary, a condensed version of key 13 points from the Department of Labor, and it's available on our website, greatpeoplemanagement.com. We have a white paper about the assessment and testing and Department of Labor guidelines. But today, just very quickly, I'm going to go through some of the most important ones that come up all the time. And some of these are kind of, Captain Obvious. Yes, obviously, we want to know what we want to accomplish before we go out there and start looking for an assessment tool. But having a checklist of things to look for is very useful, keeps you organized. So you do want to know what you're looking to accomplish. You want to understand the purpose that and why. And then select the tools that are going to get you the information to achieve that purpose, that goal. You want to have a consistent format. And in the pre-employment situation, you want to ensure that you have a whole person approach. You don't just use like a skills test, for example, and assess their Excel or Word ability. It only gives you a tiny sliver of information about who they are and what they can accomplish. It doesn't really give you a full picture. So the Department of Labor is pretty consistent with this. They want you to use a whole person approach to assessment. Another one that I always reiterate in all of my trainings and refresher trainings and all of my sessions, an assessment or combination of assessments is never the magic bullet. And if you come across an assessment that gives you a green light, a red light, hire a person, or don't hire, they're kind of very categorical, run away. Because the assessment or combination of assessment tools that you use for any talent initiative, any decision, hiring, promotional, or any other decision, should be used as only 1/3 of your decision. And in the hiring process, I utilize the three-legged stool analogy. You have to evaluate all three. The past, the present, and the future. The past being the resume, what they bring to the table, their experience. Present is the interview. And then future will be predicted by the assessment, by a good assessment. So again, it's 1/3 of your decision. I cannot stress this enough. Too many people, I think, get kind of seduced by the information because it is unbiased, it is more scientific, and so they lean on it a little more heavy. And I have to kind of pull them back and remind them of the best practices. And best practices use it as 1/3 of the decision. Another thing to remember is you as an organization are responsible for compliance, not the assessment vendor. You're responsible for compliance. And you should choose assessments that are unbiased and fair to all groups. You should not use an assessment that produces adverse impact on protected groups, especially these days. There's also legislation called Ban the Box that created a bit of upheaval in 2012 in the assessment industry. We had to make some adjustments in our recommendations. And if you're not in HR, if you're in operations, you probably never even heard of it, but it's a good idea to take a look at it if you want to select an appropriate assessment tool. The difficulty with Ban the Box legislation is that it differs by not just state, but also municipality within the state. So there's a website that was created, there's a guide, and they keep updated records regarding this legislation. So that's another thing to remember. And the rest of the guidelines are going to relate to reliability, validity, and how the assessment is implemented. A reliable instrument is not always valid. That's a fun demonstration that I like to do for my audiences all the time. So let's take a look at tape measure. How reliable, test reliability, what's the reliability of a tape measure? If I measure my phone, for example, 100 times, will I come up with the same measurement? Well, barring the user error, it's about 99.99% accurate and reliable. So the tape measure as an instrument, as a tool, is reliable. However, if I use it to measure people and then use that information to hire or not to hire them, it's not a valid tool. So validity relates to the application of the tool. Unless you have a piece of machinery or you have some other job-related guidelines that dictate that you can only hire people who are a certain height. Like this machinery has to be operated by people who are over 5'5", or fighter pilots, to fit in the cockpit, they have to be a certain size. So in that case, the scale and the tape measure become both the reliable and a valid instrument. But in most cases, we do not make hiring decisions based on measurement, at least not yet. So remember, a reliable instrument is not always valid. Where do you find information about reliability and validity? In the assessment technical manual. And if the assessment you're looking at does not have a technical manual or some kind of research paper educating you about reliability, validity, adverse impact, run away. Department of Labor recommends 0.7, 70% reliability. It's considered useful. And predictive validity, Department of Labor recommends the coefficient to be 0.35. That's considered to be very beneficial. And again, always remember, reliable instrument is not always valid. It relates to the purpose of your application. All right, so the rest of the information relates to the documentation. So we already alluded to the fact that you need to have a technical manual, user guides. This information provides you just with a peace of mind. You can file it away, and if there's ever litigation or question about using assessment results to make in making certain decisions, especially in hiring, because hiring is a very litigious environment. So you have to be very careful and make sure that you have very good documentation and prove job relatedness of the assessment tool. Proper implementation. Some assessments require your staff and assessment users, such as hiring managers, to get certification or training, or both. Some require that it's interpreted by a licensed practicing psychologist. Some require that it's interpreted by a consultant. Some don't require interpretation. So you want to ensure that you have all that information evaluated and ensure that it serves your purpose. This cheesy story that came out of the book, Soar with Your Strengths, demonstrates the value of assessments, using assessments in the workplace. So I'm just going to take 2 minutes and give you a condensed version of the cheesy story. So it's a story about rabbits that move into the woods, and they do what rabbits do well, procreate. And just like any parent, we can identify with that. We want the best for our kids. We also, as any parent, can identify with the fact that we have limited capital. So rabbits went to other animals in the woods, pulled their resources, and started a school for all little animals in the woods. First day of school, rabbits have a jumping class. Can rabbits jump? Yes, of course, they're built for it, and they love it. They are very excited to go to school the second day, and the second day is a running class. Can they run? They run faster than everybody else. They're built for it. They're good at it. Third day of school, they come in, it's a swimming class. And they're not very good. In fact, even the best swimming rabbit was not as good as lousy swimming fish. And so what happens is the parents pull them out from running and jumping class and enroll them in 3 classes of swimming. Because if we can give them enough coaching and training, they will get good at it, won't they? Isn't it what we do in the workplace all too often? Train and coach and hope for the best, when this very training and coaching we're providing them is an attack on who they are. There's a good ending to the story. Even though rabbits quit school, they started a company where they hired rabbits to run, fish to swim, and birds to fly. And wouldn't that be a wonderful company to work at, where individual weaknesses become irrelevant when they work on a complementary team, when people work on a complementary team. So do you know, who are your rabbits? Who are your fish? Who are your birds? Who do you assign to a flying team? This is where assessments come into play. They really help you navigate the complexity of human behavior, complexity of who people are. Frankly, that's your superpower. You can be a superhero too. And so when I help organizations fix people problems, it's not about me. It's much bigger than me. It's about different assessment tools that I use. I've used a variety of different assessments, probably several dozen different assessment tools. So I'm pretty assessment agnostic, I would say. And I would never claim to be an expert on every assessment tool. However, I can continue to educate HR professionals, operations professionals about different assessment tools and how to select the appropriate one. So please use this as a resource. When you use assessments, you can gain insights into your people that can help you start attracting people instead of losing them, start retaining them, truly retaining them where they want to stay, instead of bribing them with bonuses and benefits. Start developing them instead of managing problems, and start creating something instead of fixing people problems, and you can be great too. So just to recap the information that I've covered today, assessments do add an unbiased point, a data point, to all talent initiatives, to all decisions related to talent from hire to retire. This information helps address the most unpredictable aspect of your business, your people, and it leads to better decisions. I firmly believe if you have information, better information, you can make more informed decisions, better decisions that lead to better results. And you can do this more consistently. It also provides you the language that you can use throughout the organization, and that adds to the consistency. And for those of you who are in financial or connected to the P&L, financial industry, think about employee-related costs. It's not just the obvious turnover cost. It's absenteeism, conflict resolution. There's been plenty of that. Morale issues, all things that impact the engagement. So disengagement costs companies, poor productivity, poor leadership, and so much more. So much more that leads to added costs associated with employees. So by ensuring that you have the right people in the right positions, you can address many of those costs and mitigate many of those costs, not just turnover, but also productivity. And remember to recap all the Department of Labor guidelines. Not all assessments are created equal. There's different types. Use the document from Department of Labor. reliability and validity guidelines. Remember compliance issues. And assessments are 1/3 of your decision. What I also created is a scorecard, an assessment scorecard that you can use. I'm happy to share with you. That kind of goes through, it's a 1-page document, goes through all the key things that I would go through if I were to choose an assessment tool. All right, Smila, do we have questions?
Yes, Tatyana, we have a couple of questions here for you. So first off, can I use DISC for hiring?
Okay, so DISC falls into a personality assessment type. And so it's not useful in hiring because it falls into it just puts people in those 4 buckets. So it's not useful in hiring. There's no job matching capability. But I know of many companies who use it and they feel it's successful. So I cannot tell you don't use it or don't use it, but I hope that based on the information that I've covered today, I can steer you toward using a different assessment tool on the hiring side, and then use DISC during onboarding, during team development, which is where I've successfully implemented that with my clients. I hope that answers the question.
Thank you for that. Next question, should results be used as pass or fail?
So again, the pass, fail, or like green light, red light, those assessments are very categorical, and they're not useful. It's because then you kind of start thinking that it's 100% of your decision. And remember, I said it's 1/3 of your decision. So be leery of assessment types that give you that kind of information in their reports. It's not pass or fail. I always say that you cannot fail who you are. You are who you are, and the assessment, that's why we don't use the word test. It's not a test, it's an assessment. It's an assessment of your strengths and weaknesses, and then we use this information to put you in the right positions, put you on the right team, etc. Right? Any more? We have
People fake and lie. How can you trust an assessment?
Again, using the more appropriate assessment, like a normative assessment, we can mitigate some of the issues associated with people trying to give you socially desirable responses. So use normative assessments. But people actually, post-employment, when you're comfortable, when you already got the job, you're going through training and onboarding, and you are asked to take the assessment, most of the time, people will provide honest, candid responses. But many assessments that I've used also use a distortion scale of some sort that helps us or educates the assessment user, the hiring manager, or the manager, the leader, whoever's using it, about how reliable the assessment results are. If there is too much inconsistency in the assessment scores, it will flag it. So look for that. That's also a thing I didn't mention. Could be a feature that some assessments have.
What level in the company should I use assessments on? Leaders?
Yeah, so again, it depends on the assessment. Depends on the purpose you are using the assessment for. There's assessments that are specifically designed for leadership, and there's assessments that can be used for everybody in the organization, from CEO to receptionist and everybody in between. So I think it goes back to technical manual and user guide. You have to use the assessment in a purposeful manner, and the documentation that comes with the assessment you're looking to use is going to answer that question. Were there any others? Well, actually, I'll take one more.
Okay, last here. How expensive are assessments?
I alluded to that fact a little bit. The price ranges anywhere. I mean, there's some obviously free you can find online. There's some that go from $15 to thousands of dollars. It all depends on how scalable the process is. If it needs to be interpreted by licensed practicing psychologists, that adds to the cost. So the range is pretty wide, but no matter how expensive or how inexpensive the assessment is, they're very cost effective. Because if you think of weighting just one bad hire, think of how much you can save. All right, well, we're all out of time. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate your attention. And please reach out to us if you have any additional questions. We really want to be a resource and hope to see you soon.